Good evening. My name is Dr. David Doman, and welcome to another edition of Housecall. Do you have a terminal illness, or do you have a loved one who is dying? What are your hospice options? Find out right now. My guest tonight is Jason Ware, who's with Montgomery Hospice. Mr. Ware, welcome to Housecall.
Thank you, Dr. Owen.
Briefly tell our viewers about your professional background and how you went on to work with Montgomery Hospice.
Certainly. I've been a registered nurse about 18 years, done all kinds of critical care, intensive care. The more I focused in and got specialized in my care, the more I realized that death in an acute care setting is not maybe done quite as well as we could be doing. And so my interest kind of grew in that, and I ended up taking a different direction, going toward a more public health interest. And in my graduate studies, I found Montgomery Hospice and fell in love with end-of-life care, and I've been with them for about 4 years.
Very good. In terms of your professional background, tell us about your education and other activities that led up to this.
Certainly. I started off my undergrad at Syracuse University. From there, I immediately went into the military. I was an ROTC cadet and then commissioned as an officer. Stationed all 5 years of my military career at Walter Reed, the old Walter Reed in D.C.
Sure.
From there, I spent many years in the field as a staff and then a travel nurse, deciding then to go back to graduate school for public health, in which time I moved into Montgomery Hospice, and I'm presently in the inaugural class of the Masters of Palliative Care at University of Maryland.
Congratulations.
Thanks,
That's
sir.
Terrific. So let's go on to a very tough topic to cover, but one that's so important for everyone, and that's end-of-life issues and dying with dignity and comfort. Briefly, what is the statistics nationally on the site where people die?
Well, if you're looking at the Stanford University or the RAND studies, they're basically about the same. 80–90% of people will report that they would like to die in their home, with their pain managed, addressing their comfort and their dignity, as you say. However, the reality is only about 20% die in their home. A further 20% are in nursing homes, and then a further 60% are actually dying in acute care hospitals. So kind of the reverse of what they're hoping for. The 80% are actually in the 20.
And why do people in those surveys prefer to die at home?
Well, it starts with their choice. Their care is being managed, their comfort is being managed, and that's comfort in the sense of physical, spiritual, psychosocial. It's that whole person, whole family concept. And they are getting high quality care when they are maybe meeting a terminal prognosis where they're told there's nothing more that can be done for them. And they get that in the privacy of their own home. They get that with all the support structures coming to them in their space.
Do you ever get reluctance from the spouse of somebody who wants to die at home, where the spouse says, I prefer that not happen there?
There's reluctance that comes from all members of family at all levels. And it's an honest and frank conversation. Is this appropriate? Is the patient eligible? And is this something that they want? It is an election. You choose your hospice benefit. And our job at Montgomery Hospice is to show them all of the services and the care models and the staff and all the support structures that we provide to help them through this end-of-life crisis. And it's their decision ultimately if they decide to go with a hospice provider and or Montgomery Hospice.
So given that a large percentage, perhaps the majority, would prefer to pass at home, why is it, as you just said, the statistics are flipped and actually a minority end up dying at home?
As with most things, I believe it's knowledge barriers, knowledge gaps and fear. So let's say from the provider's perspective, not everyone, and physicians included, are comfortable having a conversation about end-of-life care. It's perhaps more comfortable to pursue an aggressive treatment beyond when it's medically prudent because they feel they may be letting their patients down. Physicians are trained, first do no harm and to preserve, to protect, to restore life at all costs. And that failure would reflect poorly on them and their patient. And this isn't just physicians, it's providers at all levels. There's cultural barriers. There's people who believe even the mere mention of death could bring on someone's untimely demise before their time. And it is also just knowledge that the philosophy of care exists, the model of care exists, and that the benefit structure, the insurance model that is supporting hospice in the United States specifically, that it is in place and it available, and all the depth and breadth of that benefit, so that people don't really know what is available to them. There's a lot of fears that come with it. That perhaps that hospice may hasten death, when the actual opposite is true. There are studies that show people actually tend to live longer on hospice because of the supportive care and services they receive and the attention.
Now you say hasten. I know some viewers are going to wonder whether if somebody has a terminal illness, either the patient or the family turns to you as a nurse and says, Jason, he's had enough. Can you give him something to hasten his passing? Euthanasia.
Absolutely not. Not legal, not ethical, not where we are, and it is not anything that the hospice model is doing. We do not have any position on that. We do not support or affirm.
Right. But I suspect you've had those conversations over the years.
I have.
Yes.
I'll be honest. I've had spouses, family members, friends, children, adult children pull me aside and in private ask me that. And I remind them about the philosophy of how we provide comfort and how we, try to restore and protect and preserve dignity, and that this is a natural death. Death is the most natural thing in the world, and we fear it, and we want to push it away. We've medicalized it. We've put it into the hospital system, but it's the most natural thing, and to allow that natural process, but to support it, to manage symptoms, to hear someone. Just being heard is enormously important, to allow them to express fear and loss and grief and anxiety and all the things that are going through us, from actual practical things like financial concerns and to existential things, the big questions. Why are we here? Why is there suffering? Those are things that we can do, but what we don't do is hasten. We don't change the course of things. We don't speed it up. We don't slow it down. We don't presume to have that kind of power.
Right. I suspect in your field, besides keeping somebody comfortable, you do a lot of listening.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Hearing them out and hearing their story.
Yeah.
You're walking into a stranger's home.
Right.
And at a point of crisis.
Right.
A point of distress. And you're the guest. And so you need to ingratiate yourself into that environment. And the best way you do that is listen. Listen to what their feelings are, their concerns, their needs, and address those things.
Elizabeth Kubler-Ross famously wrote a book on death and dying, the different stages. Have you found that's applicable to what you do?
I have not read on dying.
Okay. Well, it's a famous book on the different phases of facing death.
Okay.
A lot of it you actually covered in terms of grief and acceptance. So I thought you were indirectly quoting her book.
I will love to take the credit.
Yeah.
I can honestly admit that I have not read her work.
Yeah.
I have been acquainted to it through school.
Sure.
But I was not directly citing or referencing her work, although
Sure.
it makes me feel good that I'm working under the guise of her expert tutelage.
Very much so.
Yes.
Very much so. Of course, our viewers are assuming when we say somebody has a terminal illness that we're talking about cancer. But it's my understanding that the hospice looks at a broader patient population.
Absolutely.
To share with us some of the other potential diagnoses you've encountered over the years.
Certainly. So we have cardiac conditions, congestive heart failure, where the trajectory and prognosis is pretty well established and predetermined. We see it in plateaus, sort of like a step and a steadier trajectory, where we also see vascular dementia, Alzheimer's dementia, more of a steady, slower slope and decline. There are basically anything that has a terminal prognosis. The definition is that should this disease take its natural course, it is likely that the patient would pass away in 6 months or less.
Okay.
Any disease that meets that criteria is eligible for hospice. So it really does encompass all disease processes, HIV, AIDS, anything with a terminal prognosis meets the eligibility criteria.
You have a very big responsibility dealing with this day in and day out.
With pride.
Yeah, good for you. Does it ever get to you?
I feel that my training in an intensive care environment has formed, we would say, good walls.
Yes. Good
distance and protection, professional reserve, while still allowing for a connection.
And some empathy.
Yeah, absolutely. So to be able to empathize with my patients and connect with their families and what their needs are, but that at the end of that visit to be able to step back from that, and even we have opportunities for staff to reflect. So every 2 weeks the team gets together and we talk about patients we've lost, patients we're currently caring for, and that gives us a time to work through any stress we're experiencing, any personal load we're carrying from that caring for those families. But I find personally, I manage it well because I feel that what I'm doing is good and it doesn't invade into my personal life.
You mentioned earlier in passing the financial coverage for this. So what are the options to pay for hospice care?
They're wonderful, actually. So if you have insurance, so you have Medicare, Medicaid, private insurance, most private insurance, and anyone who's under those first two categories, the benefit is 100% covered. So if you are underinsured or have no insurance, Montgomery Hospice is a non-for-profit hospice organization, and we will provide the same level of care, the same high quality standards that people come to expect from Montgomery Hospice, regardless of your ability to pay. So I always put the caveat in there that we're not covering room and board, but for the hospice benefit and services, those are 100% covered if you're Medicare, Medicaid, private insurance, or if you lack the ability to pay, we will provide that same level of care.
Excellent. What is your relationship with the Montgomery County government?
There is no direct relationship. We are a certificate of need state. We operate in the county, but we are not of the county. We are an independent nonprofit. We've been in the county for 36 years. We're the longest standing nonprofit. We're the largest, not longest standing nonprofit hospice. And we're the largest nonprofit hospice in the county. We have wonderful support from our community, lots of philanthropic giving, and just a generally good reception from our community members and neighbors.
And going back to the beginning, when did hospice services first develop historically?
Historically, it goes back to the Dark Ages. Hospice is hospitality, you may be familiar with the root. We're looking at travelers on the road across Europe and Asia, and they would stop at these hospices, and they would be for weary travelers and the sick and infirmed, where they would get respite. And they would get a moment's pause and repose where they could collect themselves, or if they were so terminally ill, they would die. Okay,
and when was it first started in this country?
In this country, in the early 70s, the Hospice of Connecticut was the first in the United States, and the founder from there attended a seminar, a lecture by Dame Cecily Saunders, who's credited as being the founder of modern hospice in southeast London, I believe, in the UK.
So it's been about 50 years.
Yes.
Remarkable. Yeah. We're going to pause for a moment. We have a public service announcement. Don't go away. When we return, more with Jason Ware of the Montgomery Hospice. See you in a moment.
Hey, Hard, what's this?
That's my resignation letter.
You're resigning?
Why? Because you're constantly ignoring me? You're half as active as you used to be, and you eat stuff like this. You've been putting me under a lot of pressure lately. That's why I'm ready to quit.
I forgot. I'll do better. Please, don't quit on me.
Okay, but remember, it's not what you say, it's what you do.
Listen to your heart. Don't let it quit on you.
Let's go for a walk.
Uncontrolled high blood pressure could lead to a stroke, heart attack, or death. Get yours to a healthy range before it's too late.
We're back. We're interviewing this evening Jason Ware of Montgomery Hospice. Jason, when we paused for the break, we were discussing the 50-year near history of hospice movement in the United States. Take us to the evolution of the benefits that have developed over time.
Sure. So as I mentioned, it came to the United States in the early 70s, and it was very much a grassroots movement at that point. There was a need identified, and people served that need, but they didn't have the insurance or the governmental support. It wasn't until the early 1980s that Medicare came out with the Medicare hospice benefit. And that actually outlines very specific mandates and criteria for eligibility and requirements of a service provider to be eligible for reimbursement for hospice care. And in that, there is requirements for staffing, availability, payment, things that are covered by the hospice provider. And that has been the model. The Medicaid has taken from Medicare, and as well as the private insurance companies. They basically use that same model of care and expectations as the services and care model for hospice.
So what are the benefits that hospice provides a terminal patient?
Absolutely. So we're there to do pain and symptom management. That's the physical. And then the psychosocial, that is all the stressors, all the things that are burdening you practically and functionally. And then the spiritual psychosocial, that's the existential we talked about. And so you get a physician directing your care. You get a nurse providing hands-on care and case management. You have a social worker and a spiritual care provider, but there's also direct hands-on physical care. So you get a home health aide can provide personal care, bed baths, feedings, things like that. You have volunteers. Montgomery Hospice has 300 staffed employees, but we also have 315 volunteers who donated 21,000 hours last year alone to volunteer care. It is remarkable. And the so that's the care team that is. There's a support structure that's behind that, all the administrative, the intake, the liaisons, the back office that are supporting those field teams that go out and care for the patient. And they also give medical equipment, so things like wheelchairs, beds, oxygen concentrators, walkers, things like that. There are supplies, wound care supplies, ostomy supplies, personal care supplies that are also included in the benefit. If you were to require respite, that means if you have a situation where your caregivers were unavailable or there's a burnout or a fatigue scenario, we could offer respite in a contracted facility, a nursing home, or we have Casey House, which is our inpatient hospice facility. And there's also inpatient. Let's say you were to sustain a fall and there's a possible fracture. We would either transport you to a facility to have that evaluated and managed, or we could have those services come to you, mobile x-ray and such. So long as it's within the plan of care, we can have you go to an inpatient facility for short term. Again, so long as it's in that hospice plan of care. There are also complementary therapies. There are things like music and pet therapy, aromatherapy. There's massage and Reiki. There are all kinds of things that are Montgomery Hospice does a kind of above and beyond the actual benefit.
Sure. But
being available 24/7, 365 to support that whole person concept, that's what the hospice benefit is designed to do, and hospice providers are expected to, and Montgomery Hospice does above and beyond.
Remarkable, really a team approach.
Absolutely.
So our viewers are wondering, how do you interact with the clergy if that's something the patient is interested in?
Absolutely. So we have chaplains, we have rabbis, we have people of different denominational training and faith traditions, but we come in with no agenda. We respond appropriately to the needs and wants of the individual. Mm-hmm. If they have a faith community, we try to keep them in contact with that. We try to have members of their congregation or their flock or whatever parish to be in contact, to help those bonds, those bridges. As you lose function, maybe you lose, your world gets smaller. You lose connectivity with your friends and your community at large. And we try to help bridge those gaps. And we support those faith traditions, and we support all of those rituals and rites and practices specific to a given religion or spirituality or whatever the individual person ascribes to.
Besides spending obviously a lot of time with the patient, do you spend a lot of time separately with the families?
Absolutely. Absolutely, because they're going through this too. Yeah. It is everyone who's affected. And family is a very interesting definition these days. It's not the nuclear family of many generations past. We don't define it. We don't limit it. If you are experiencing a loss from this person's terminal illness and their imminent death, we are there to support you through anticipatory grieving, actual grief and loss. So the bereavement period after the person's passed away. The benefit requires that we provide services for 13 months, but we will continue to support that person and that family unit beyond that if necessary. And that actually extends to our providers in the community as well. So when we are caring for people, we make intense bonds with them. And when they pass, even though it's not your blood family or a family unit, they experience loss. And so we come into long-term care facilities, assisted living, group homes, nursing homes, and we provide what's called a time to remember, a safe space to reflect on their grief and loss. And we provide that to any resident, regardless of their connection to Montgomery Hospice, any resident of Montgomery County.
Very nice. If somebody decides they want to pursue the hospice program, how is the decision made about home hospice versus a hospice facility?
So we meet you where you live. So it is, you could be in your private residence, you call your nursing home or your group home, assisted living. That is your space. That's where we meet you. About 90% of our patients are in their home, and our ideal is for them to get back to that home space. But where they go can also depend on the symptoms. If they're in their home and their symptoms are unmanageable, despite all the interventions, all the management structures we put in place, all the support, we can't get them managed into a comfortable space, we have the option of Casey House. Casey House is Montgomery County's only inpatient freestanding hospice facility. It's a remarkable home-like environment. It is staffed 24/7, and it is the ICU without any of the ICU feel. All the personal contact and connection, those immediate feedback loops where we can manage symptoms and keep them very tightly controlled to keep that quality and comfort, that dignity as the central focus that we can do. And the idea is still to get them back to their home environment. Manage the symptoms, stabilize, and then get them back to the space that they decided they want to be in.
Where's Casey House located in Montgomery County?
Sure. It's on Muncaster Mill and Needwood.
Okay.
If you're located right next to Magruder High School.
Sure.
Yeah.
And how many patients can you accommodate at a time?
14 patients, yes. So there's a split side, 7 and 7. There's a nurse and a nurse's aide for either side, a float nurse that moves between, and then a physician or a nurse practitioner on, available 24/7.
Now, you'd mentioned earlier the diversity of medical conditions that may make you eligible for hospice care, whether it's cancer, end-stage heart disease, dementia, etc. But what is the criteria for eligibility? Because somebody may have cancer, and yet their prognosis may be that they may go on many years.
Absolutely. So there's a weighty tome called the Local Coverage Determinants, and it has very specific guidelines. We encourage people to call us. We are the experts in end-of-life care. Call Montgomery Hospice. We'll come out and sit in your home, sit in your personal space, and we'll provide you with all the information about the hospice program, as well as do a physical evaluation and coordinate with your primary care provider, your physician, nurse practitioner, and determine through those criteria if you're eligible. We generally look at debility and decline. You could do this, you can no longer do that. And we kind of keep an eye and see those metrics as they march on. Ability to eat less, swallow less, walk less, you're engaging less, and we see those kind of things. But the idea is that we're seeing decline, and call to have us evaluate that. Another one, I'm trying to actually rephrase this in my head. Sometimes when we have a patient that we're not quite sure, we ask the surprise question. And what I would go is this: if I called you about a patient of yours 6 months from now, and you received a call and I said that your patient, Miss A, passed away, would you be surprised? If the answer to that question is no, then they're likely eligible for hospice.
Now, you mentioned a patient's family physician, for example. What is the role of the family physician once somebody with terminal care is deemed appropriate for hospice?
We want them very much involved. Often you have a very long-standing relationship. You've built trust. You have a wealth of knowledge about the entire medical and personal, often, history of this person. And we're new. We're walking in the door. You just elected your hospice benefit, and we get some credibility from your continued involvement. we get the insight, we get the connection, and we get the feedback. We are working with someone who knows this patient, who cares for this patient, and now it's a partnership. We're very much involved. Everyone talks to everyone. It is a very closed loop, kind of symbiotic situation.
Patient is transferred to hospice care, and they have other health conditions, high blood pressure, diabetes, high cholesterol, whatever, and they're on a variety of medications. What happens to those medications?
Every patient who comes to hospice has all of their medical history as well as their medications reviewed. They call it a reconciliation. So we're reconciling if this is still appropriate. So we weigh benefits versus burdens. So there can actually be a thing called pill burden, too many. Basically, you're just taking too many things, and as your physical health declines and changes, maybe the need for those medications changes as well. Coverage of those medications is a separate question, and that is anything that's related to comfort. Pain, agitation, anxiety, GI distress type of things, those are required to be covered. And anything that seems secondary, a comorbidity, an additional disease process, let's say diabetes, it doesn't necessarily have to be covered. However, if you can support that it affects your comfort, your quality of life, then it would be covered by the benefit. And that's the medical director's decision. So we don't stop your medications. We don't come in and say, okay, you're in hospice, everything must stop. We evaluate the appropriateness for each one of those medications, and we cover it as well.
Okay. Now, you mentioned the medical director. What's the interplay between then the medical director for the hospice in general as opposed to the patient's individual physician?
So our medical director directs the plan of care, signs the certification of eligibility, certifying that this patient is not just eligible one time, but it's a continuous eligibility process. So we're constantly assessing and evaluating that this person continues to be eligible for their hospice benefit. And that ultimately, that decision comes down to our medical director. We have team physicians, and we have teams of the social worker, nurse, and chaplain who are constantly reevaluating, and then periodically what they call benefit periods, 90 days, and every 60 days thereafter, because there's no limit to your hospice benefit. So long as you continue to demonstrate eligibility, even with that 6-month prognosis, it could go on for years, or as the natural course of your disease takes, that given good time. So the process is ongoing. The medical director directs the philosophical and strategic plan for the hospice, as well as certifies that each one of those patients is continued to be eligible for the benefit.
Excellent coordination. We have just 30 seconds left. So very briefly, define for our viewers grief and bereavement.
Sure. Grief is this intense feeling of sadness experienced with loss. Bereavement is more the period of grief following this loss. And that's where I mentioned the grief department, the counseling department. They will support your patients for 13 months, as the benefit says. But again, it is an ongoing support for any member of our community in Montgomery County. And we actually go out and do education, group counseling. We go into the high schools and prepare kids for that as well.
Very good. Well, Jason, thank you so much for joining us at Housecall.
It was my pleasure.
My thanks to Jason Ware of Montgomery Hospice. My thanks to my team here at the station. And most important, my thanks to you, the viewer. Let us know how we're doing. You can reach me at my practice website, montgomerygastro.com. As for our next show, it's going to be a very interesting topic. My daughter, Melissa Doman, a consultant in emotional health and wellness in the workplace, will be reviewing this important emerging topic. It's going to be a fascinating show. See you then next time for another edition of Housecall. Good evening.